we have got a very special guest all the way from New Zealand. We're speaking with him tonight from New Zealand, and we've got actor Jed Brophy with us tonight. Jed, welcome to Nerdvana.
Welcome to you, Jim. Welcome to New Zealand.
Oh, I'll tell you what. You know, I've got some friends who live in Australia, but I don't know any. You're the first one I've known from New Zealand, so I feel like now I've sort of completed that whole area now, that whole hemisphere.
Jim has covered his world tour.
Brilliant.
Well, Jed, this is so exciting because you just going all the way back into the beginning of your career. I think you started with a collaboration with a fellow whose directorial style I love. And early on in your career, you started with Peter Jackson, and you guys have worked together on so many projects now. I mean, almost too numerous to mention.
Yeah, I was very lucky, actually. The second film I ever worked on was an early film of Peter's, his third film, actually, called Braindead. I think it's called Dead Alive in America.
It is called both now. I've seen it both ways now in America.
Yeah. And I was doing a theatre show with the co-writer, Stephen Sinclair, and he said that the director, Peter Jackson, had not cast his lead zombie, and would I be keen? And I have to admit I wasn't. I didn't really know if I wanted to play a zombie, but Peter let me have a look at a script, and I thought it was hilarious, and lucky enough, I was still able to get the part. And so I think I've worked on 7 projects with him since then, and they've all been, graduating to more and more fantastical budgets and fantastical places. And for me, it's been a great thing because I've been able to stay here in Wellington, where my family are, and work, so it's been fantastic.
Now, Jed, going back a little bit before 1992, was acting something as a kid growing up that you were sort of leaning towards? Was that something you thought you might do down the road?
No, not at all. I grew up on a farm, a sheep and cattle farm, 2,500 acres, about 7,000 sheep, 500 cows, and some horses. And I don't think anyone in my family would have ever predicted that I would have ended up doing this. I was going to be a farmer, and but along the way I went to university to study kinesiology, sports science, and it was there that I got into drama. Actually, it was at university that I started doing drama as an outside paper. And then there was a couple of people down there identified I had a bit of talent and said I should go to drama school, which I did, thinking I could teach.
Okay.
And I've never taught it. I got bitten by the bug and was lucky enough to hit the industry at a time where there were people like Peter Jackson and other filmmakers who were charging ahead and making our own stories. So it was good timing, I think. Very good timing.
Outstanding. I know about getting the bug. Yeah, that's right. Once it gets you, that's it. It never lets you go. But
a lot of people say that, and you don't really believe it until it actually happens. I don't think there's anything quite as freeing as having that experience of being on stage, especially live stage, and having an audience appreciate what you've done. It's because a lot of jobs you don't get that kind of feedback, but we are lucky enough in the entertainment business that we do get feedback for what we do. And I think that's what, when people say that getting bitten by the bug, I think that's what it is. It's that thing of putting yourself out there and trying something and actually succeeding.
Absolutely. Now, Jed, you did a lot of theatrical work before you started getting into the films, if I remember your resume correctly. Didn't you go on stage for quite a long time? I did. In fact, that was my passion. The film industry, we only really made 1 or 2 films a year here at that point. Mm-hmm. It's a government-funded enterprise here on the whole, although Peter Jackson changed that. Right.
And so in terms of wanting to work full-time, you had to be able to do everything in this country. You had to be able to do stage and television and film. And so there was a lot of theatre happening, and as a young man straight out of drama school, that was the entry into the film industry, was through theatre.
You know, and it's funny too, because I noticed on I'm actually a huge game player. In fact, I one of the games that you've actually done a voiceover on, Heavenly Sword, is one of my favorite video games of all times. How different is it from doing voiceover? Because I noticed, a lot of what you've done has actually been the live action. How different is it for doing voiceover work?
It's kind of they're aligned now because of the whole motion capture aspect of the game. Andy Serkis and the Weta crowd who developed the software for Gollum really changed the game for gaming forever. You shoot it on a soundstage like a theatre piece. You rehearse, you have scripts, and then you create these characters which the computer enhances. And so it's not a lot different to doing live theatre, doing games now. You can, of course, go back and enhance the voice stuff, but most of it is actually done live on a soundstage. So, yeah, I mean, that was great for me because Andy directed that. He came over with the Ninja crew from the UK. They shot it all here in Wellington.
Right. Yep.
And great for me and Bruce Hopkins, the two Kiwis, to get on it because we got to work with some fantastic people and got to be directed by Andy. He's the genius. So I kind of get my leg into doing motion capture, which then led on to doing some work on Tintin and previs for The Hobbit. And who knows what else for Peter. It's been great.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Now you had but your collaboration with Peter Jackson. I mean, that was like one of the first films then you had stepped into after all the stage work.
Yeah, it was pretty good. It was Peter was a young director trying to make his films on very, very limited budgets back in those days, and we were sort of all on the same page. We all knew that he was going to be something special. It was just whether or not he could actually hang out and make them in New Zealand. And luckily for him, with Heavenly Creatures winning
incredible movie.
Getting nominated for a screenwriting Oscar, that was really the leg into Hollywood, and that's when he was able to do the film The Frighteners, which then led on to people interested in him as a writer-director.
Yeah.
So.
And you're just rattling off names I love: The Frighteners, Heavenly Creatures. I mean, incredibly good films. I noticed you did. You also did stunt work. You did stunt work on The Lovely Bones.
Yeah, I was when they did some reshoots here in Wellington. I doubled for Mark Wahlberg because he couldn't be here. He was already, I think, in training for The Fighter. So, also before they went to the United States, to Pennsylvania to shoot that film, we shot the previs here. So we shot Peter and another DOP called Richard Black, who does a lot of his second unit camera work. We shot with two cameras a lot of the emotional scenes from that film with a group of Kiwi actors, just so that Peter could work on the script.
Wow.
That's awesome.
Yeah, so I was shooting a film called Second Hand Wedding up here, and Richie was the DOP on that, and we would travel back into Wellington every second day and shoot with Peter. There was just a core group of maybe 5 or 6 actors.
Yeah.
And we shot a lot of the film, just as previs on real cameras, just so that he could look at how to get the drama happening between the characters. And that's something that Peter does that a lot of other people do now, is he tends to use cameras and crew to shoot his pre-visualization before he signs off on the script, just to make sure that he's got the drama working.
That's awesome.
It's a lovely thing for him to be able to do, and I know a lot of young filmmakers would love the opportunity to do that. You have to have the budget, of course.
Yeah. Well, of course, the good thing is nowadays, with so much being done on video, I guess that probably helps make it a little easier to do, although you still got your day-to-day expenses, but still, that's amazing. He's able to do that.
Yeah, it is. Yeah. It's the thing that a lot of people don't realize about Peter is he loves to shoot. His real passion is actually being behind the camera and doing that stuff. He's never happier than when he's on a set, running a camera.
Right.
That's what really turns him on. And I know that he's shooting stunt stuff, mocap stunt stuff for the third Hobbit film as we speak, in Wellington and Portsmouth Road, and he will continue to do that for as long as he's allowed to, I would imagine.
That's awesome.
Well, you've opened the door a little bit. Let's go back before we get into The Hobbit, because we've got a lot to ask you about that. You got involved with the Lord of the Rings trilogy. I mean, probably the hugest film trilogy I can think of to date. When those were made, I mean, they were just absolutely epic in proportion. What was it like when you guys first started working on the first trilogy film?
Well, my involvement with that film dates back to the very beginning, actually. I was working on a short film by a guy called Jason Stutter, and I was at where now Stone Street Studios are. We were shooting in a place that was about to be pulled down to build the studio that Peter was building there. And this is pre him getting the money for Lord of the Rings. And I was asked by Peter and Fran to come and help them with the radio play version of Lord of the Rings to try and go to the United States to then source money to make it. They'd got the rights, and they were about to do a radio version of it, so they, putting all of the characters down with voice, with the scripts that they'd written, to go and try and shop it around. And so myself and Craig Parker and various other Wellington actors got together in a place called Marmalade Audio, and we played these characters. I think I played Frodo for a morning, and I played Legolas, and I played all sorts of orcs. And then I flew off to the United Kingdom to do a play, Skin Tight, at the Edinburgh Festival. And while I was there, I got an email from Richard Taylor saying, "It's all go, it's been green lit. Get back to New Zealand or you'll miss out." And I did. I literally got on the next plane available after I'd finished the show and came over here and got asked if I would play 2 or 3 orc characters, prosthetic orc characters. Obviously, they'd cast a lot of the main characters at that stage. And so my first day on set was working with Christopher Lee.
Wow.
Yeah. As Shaku, and it was a 7.5-hour makeup. That was my introduction to filming.
Wow.
And it was during that first month and a half of working that I got asked. I'd done a short film with some friends of mine using some of the equipment just in days that we had off. And I heard that they were going to do the Black Rider stuff. And having grown up on horseback, I kind of asked the guy who ran the horse department if they had any spaces, because I'd love to go and do it. And got a full-time job helping to train the horses. So that was
that's so awesome.
My part-time, full-time job was being one of 20 full-time riders, training 82 horses for all of the actors.
Oh my goodness.
I guess growing up on that farm really paid off.
It really did. It was that great amalgamation between the things that you do in your past coming to fruition at exactly the right time. All of the physical stuff that I'd done with Peter and the prosthetic work that we'd already done on Heavenly Creatures and Braindead meant that they knew I could do prosthetics and perform well through the rubber, through the latex. and just I had the most amazing 3 years working full time on, as you say, possibly the biggest ever trilogy that will ever be shot, because we shot all 3 films at once.
Yeah. I just can't imagine. I in my lifetime, I can't think of anything that's been as epic as those 3. As you said, shooting them all at once. Nobody would have thought that possible, I think, until Peter pulled it off.
Yeah, and I have to say that even during it, we didn't think it was possible. It was without kind of, it's easy in hindsight to say, it did seem to be quite chaotic at times. We had 4 full-time units working. Peter was often not even where we were. He'd be via satellite directing through a tiny clamshell as to what he wanted. And I've told the story before, and I know he won't mind me saying it, but we shot this one day doing charges as Rohan, as Rohirrim, and we should have actually been Gondorian knights. So we shot the whole day in the wrong costume.
Oh, no.
And Peter was in Queenstown, I think, and we got this call at the end of the day going, "Yeah, it looked great, but you were all in the wrong costumes." So that was an expensive day.
That's
Did
amazing.
you guys, I mean, once the film was wrapped and put together, and I guess started getting released about 2002, I think it was. I'm trying to remember how far back it was.
2001, I think the first film came out.
Maybe, it was 2000. What were you, when you guys went to the first screenings, what were some of the things going through your mind when you actually saw it in its completed state?
Well, I have to say the first thing about that first premiere in Wellington was we'd never seen a red carpet event in this country that had so many people.
Wow.
It was just, there was just not that much interest in a film, and films here. There's always the hard-bitten people who love cinema, but we don't really have, up until those films, we never really had a huge kind of premiere event where there was press from overseas and people flying in from the States and people flying in from Germany and from the UK just to see people on the red carpet. we hadn't really had that kind of Hollywood situation here at all.
Right.
And it comes down to the caliber of the actors and just the fact that New Line Cinema knew, I think, that they were onto something really, really special. I do remember the 20 minutes that they cut together to take to Cannes, which had a lot of that Black Rider chase scene that we did in it. And Mark Ordesky from New Line Cinema just saying this is going to blow people's minds. People just weren't expecting this. I think a lot of people thought that Peter might not actually make a particularly good film. His track record in terms of the films that he'd made before then were fairly low budget, very small stories, with a lot of vision in them. But this was a huge ask for anybody to make 3 films at once. And I'd seen a sneak preview of the film, and it was jaw-dropping. It really was.
Oh, yeah,
the performances especially, but also the cinematography. Andrew Lesnie's, the colour of the grade, and just the slow motion effects that he got in there with those scenes with Galadriel, and the performances. It was a star-studded cast of people. Some of them who hadn't really had a lot of exposure, but I think they all knew that they were on something special as well. You do step up when you know you're on something that could actually, it could break new ground in cinema, as those films did, and we got lucky too. We got lucky having Viggo Mortensen. I take my hat off to him. For me, from that experience, he is the one thing that I take away, that having worked with him on that film, that it really showed me what film acting was all about. His process, he was every single stunt that he did at 120%. There was he didn't hold back anything. And as someone who wanted to get better at film acting, I couldn't have had any better mentor than watching him every day on set.
Oh, the names you're throwing out there, and again, you were right as far as, I think in this country anyway, people were a little worried about what these films are going to be like. We all grew up having to read Tolkien. For most of us in high school and college, I mean, this was the series of books that you fell in love with. Yeah. For someone to to have the guts to step into that realm and take a shot at making a film about this, I mean, that's gutsy. I mean, that really was gutsy on his part. Yeah. I mean, I trusted that Peter knew what he was doing. Back on, Braindead days, the lead actor, Tim Barham, and I had a discussion about, this guy's going to go places, he's a genius, just because of the vision that he had and the way that he did things, which was completely different to anyone else. Very, very visceral in terms of wanting the actor to do their own stunts because it informs the character. The kind of thing that hadn't really been done in this country before, just in terms of him really wanting the actor to do their own work to inform the next part of the process. And he was very lucky on Lord of the Rings that he got a group of actors who embraced the way that he wanted to shoot it as well. There was a lot of faith shown from people who'd obviously had a career before coming to work on these films. And like I say, it was just an amalgamation of we didn't really have a qualified stunt team in New Zealand. There'd been people who'd worked on Xena and Hercules who were good with swords, but we didn't have a stunt guild before Lord of the Rings. We didn't have a horse department. We built the horse department from the ground up. We'd never worked with 300, 400 horses on a film set before. And we were very lucky that we had people like Lyle and John Scott come from Canada for those big charges, and we had a lot of help from people like Andrew Leslie in terms of, getting together a group of camera people who got his style of shooting, got Peter's style of shooting. It was a bit like going to war, in terms of... I remember those horses we're on tour for 14 months with those horses. We had, 82 horses, 5 stallions. It was a really big ask. It was a big mission. But there was a lot of faith shown in the fact that everyone got behind Peter's way of shooting and just got on with the job. And I have to say that a lot of that comes down to the New Zealand way of doing things. We had a saying here, she'll be right, which is, it'll be okay. And a lot of the time you heard people just going, Peter saying, is it possible? And Peter would go, well, yep, I'm sure it's possible. We'll just have to have a crack at it and see what happens.
I love that.
What a great! Now coming out of the Lord of the Rings, you were in 2 more films with that Peter was involved with that I really loved before we got into the Hobbit. And one was the reboot of King Kong, which has always been a favorite of mine. But And I don't want to gloss over King Kong, but I got to go to a film that when I saw it in the theaters, I knew it was going to sort of set the bar again on science fiction, and that was District 9. I thought that was one of the most underrated films when it came out of any film I had seen up until that point. I absolutely loved what he did with that.
Yeah. That was, there's a lot of luck in the film industry.
Yeah.
And sometimes timing is everything. Neil came to New Zealand extensively to shoot Halo. And,
right.
For one reason or another, the Halo film didn't happen. Mm-hmm. I'm not really sure of the ins and outs as to what happened there, but he was in New Zealand. He'd been here for 6 to 8 months. And, Peter knew that he wanted to work with him. He knew that this was a young man who had a lot of potential and was a lot like him, just in terms of where he'd started. He'd been in South Africa trying to make his own films. And Peter said, well, do you have any scripts? I think Peter and Fran asked him if he had any scripts, and he said, well, I've made this short film, which is a science fiction. And they had a look at it, and they sort of said, why don't you consider making that idea into a feature, and we'll find the money for you, which is pretty much how that happened. And Neil went to Johannesburg, where he's from, to shoot it, which is where he wanted to, with a group of film makers and actors that he knew from his past. Mm-hmm. But when he had a look at the footage, he wasn't sure that the pictures actually told the story. So the reason I was involved is that I got a phone call. I was up in Gisborne, actually, doing surf lifesaving. My son does surf lifesaving. He was up there doing the Masters Champs, and got a call saying, how's your South African accent? And I said, oh, pretty good. It's okay. And they said, Neil wants to know if you can come and do some monologues for him for his film District 9. And I hadn't seen any of the filming at that stage.
Right.
Drove all night back to Wellington, got back to Wellington at 6 in the morning, and met with him, and I trialled my South African accent in front of him, and he said, that's great. Gave me a page of a monologue, and we sat down and just shot it. And that particular line that ends up in the film was just a throwaway line. He said, say something about them being like prawns. And so that was a totally made-up line. But it was a lot of the stuff that we shot that day didn't end up being in the film, because he realized when he cut it together that the pictures that he shot actually told the story well enough without having to explain to the audience. Unreal. But yeah, it's a phenomenally good film.
I think so.
The motion capture that they managed to do to get those creatures looking like they did, and just the visceral style of the way that he shot was very reminiscent of Peter's work. And,
absolutely, and it had almost a documentary to it.
You go. Sorry.
I was going to say it almost had a documentary type feel to it, the way that they put that together.
Yeah, it was really clever, and again, the lead performance, the lead performance was fantastic, and it was something very, very different in terms of the way that he went about it. South Africa has that long history of resettling people, in their dark days, and I think that he was very clever to use the history of what had happened in that country to look at, not just another race of people, but another species trying to be living side by side with humans in their country. It was a very clever thing. Very
much so. Yeah, I was going to say the whole setting in Johannesburg and stuff, brilliant. Hey, Jed, in the few minutes we got left, I've got to talk about The Hobbit, though, because you guys just wrapped not too long ago on the third Hobbit, didn't you?
Yeah, we did our last lot of reshoots last year, actually, for proper reshoots in terms of us walking and talking and busting things up for the Battle of the Five Armies, just before the whole circus started for the second film last year. We have got together, the actors have got together to do some ADR. We've been doing fighting and running and dying sounds, as we call it. And they quite often get us in groups to do that because it's easier to record, and we can get some play between each other, bouncing off each other. So that's really all that we have left to do is the automated dialogue replacement, the ADR as they call it. Right. We did hope, actually, a bit like with Lord of the Rings, that we would have one final hurrah shooting on the sound stages this year, but Peter obviously knew that he'd got as much of the actor stuff as he wanted, and the rest of it was going to be motion capture. But there's a lot of all of our stunt doubles have been working doing motion capture stunt stuff for the Battle of the Five Armies.
Oh, wow.
As I say, as we speak, it's still going. And yeah, we're looking forward to seeing a cut, actually. I haven't seen any of this third film.
Oh, really?
From,
wow.
Yeah, well, apart from the stuff that we've done ADR for, we haven't seen any kind of long but shot together. So yeah, it's going to be a big surprise for us as well.
I can imagine. Now, how long did the makeup take for Nori? I mean, how long did
it was for me. It was, you know, I know a lot of the other guys found it difficult, but for me, it was the easiest makeup job I've done for Peter.
Really? Okay.
It was only 2.5 hours.
Wow.
The silicon latex that we use is a lot easier to wear. It's kind of breathable. It has opacity, and it's a lot lighter. And yeah, it's not nearly as time consuming as the old foam latex because it blends better, and you don't have to keep redoing the edges. The old foam latex, the edges used to kind of fray, and you'd have to repaint them and re-stick them down, and it was a bit of a fraught procedure. But
yeah,
yeah, the wiggage, my wiggage took the longest. It was 45 minutes to get that wig looking like it did.
Oh, not bad.
So,
not bad.
So between the first Hobbit, with the Lord of the Rings stuff, with your makeup with Peter, to this one, how much has changed as far as the makeup goes? I mean, it's been what 13 years now since the first Hobbit. So, how much has changed in the makeup realm?
Well, a lot. There are two reasons why it's changed a lot. But as I say, the new silicon stuff that they use is a lot easier to mold. It's a lot, it looks a lot more lifelike. It looks more like skin, so it's easier to paint. So you don't have to kind of get so much paint depth in there to have it looking like proper skin.
Mm-hmm.
And also there are a lot more prosthetic artists out there than there were back in the day on Lord of the Rings in this country. We still had to import people from Australia and quite a few from the States, but we have a lot more people in New Zealand that have trained up doing that kind of prosthetic painting. And so, those are the two things that have been game changers in this country, really. A lot more people have used prosthetics in their films here since then. And also, as I said, with Lord of the Rings, we had to build that team from scratch. We didn't have a team of people who had worked on such a large-scale thing, whereas I think coming into The Hobbit was a lot more knowledge about how to run it. It was a lot more streamlined. Peter managed to get back together probably 90% of his crew. So from that aspect, they knew what they were in for. It's always easier going into something when you've been successful with a big project and a big way of shooting as well. But yeah, for sure. Also the paints. There's a lot more technology in terms of the paints and the products for taking makeup off and just how to look after us. We had these cooling suits that they made for Formula One drivers, which they're like a vest that goes right on your skin, which have tubes attached, and we had ice cold water being pumped onto our skin underneath our very heavy costumes.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. That means that you don't sweat the prosthetic off so much either.
That's right. Yeah. I was going to say, that's brilliant. I wouldn't have even thought about that. The technology from the racing industry. That's brilliant. That they come up with that.
Especially for Stephen Hunter as Bomber.
Oh,
he
God,
was carrying so much weight around on him. His fat suit was enormous.
Oh, I bet.
So yeah, he was plugged in pretty much 24/7.
Oh, that's right.
I think he's still plugged in today.
It could be. Yeah, I was going to say. Hey, Jed, out of all of the different characters you've played over the years, is there one particular character on film that you'd like to portray or something you could see and say, boy, I'd just like to do that sometime in my career?
Yeah, look, I think that little part in District 9, James Hope, the policeman, I'd love him to do District 10. He talked about it back in the day. He talked about doing District 10 and looking at what happens to these guys when the prawns start being assimilated into society a bit more. Yeah. And I'd really like to see him to make the sequel. I know that not a lot of people. There is a kind of an idea that maybe we shouldn't do so many sequels, but I think that film is crying out for one. I want to know what happens next.
I agree. Yeah. I agree. Yeah, I mean, are they going to come back? They're supposed to come back and get them. I want to see that.
Yeah.
Well, you can tell
nice
Peter.
To go and work in another country. I'd like to go and see a bit more of South Africa and go and work there.
Yeah.
But it's hard, you know. You have to kind of leave characters behind and move on. But yeah, for sure, having had a little taste on that film and having seen the success of it, that would be a film that I'd really like to work on again.
Well, you can tell Peter, right? We'll vote for that. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
I would pay to go see that again.
Sounds like a Kickstarter fund waiting to happen.
Indeed. Crowdfunding. I love it.
That's it. Hey, Jed, have you got any aspirations to ever get behind the camera someday and direct yourself?
I do. I've come up with a lot of ideas over the years and put them down on paper. The hardest thing living in this country is, as I say, because of it's a small population. It's only 4 million people live in New Zealand, and so when you're asking them to fund a movie, it's a difficult thing, and it's got to be the right thing. I made a short film called Undercover when we were shooting Lord of the Rings, as I said.
Yeah.
From doing that, I realised just how hard it was to get your ideas from paper onto film. There's so many things that get in the way.
Absolutely,
personality and budget, and it's a hard thing. It's, you know, some people are very visual. You know, Peter's like that. He can see it in his head, and from his head he can then get that onto celluloid. For me, the live experience is the thing that really, you know, I've directed theatre, and I really love that process. So I know I can direct actors. It's just getting the right story. Finding the right story is the thing that I have to do. And I'm sort of partway through writing a treatment for a film, which I really want to do. But it's got to be, you know, it's got to be the right project. I keep writing things and then going, I don't really like it anymore. You know, I spend too much time writing it, you end up hating it. So I'll find the right thing. I do really want to do a Western.
A Western? You know, oh, wow.
Yeah. Having grown up on horseback and sort of really understanding man alone in the wild.
Sure.
There's I read a lot of Westerns, a lot of Louis L'Amour when I was younger, and Zane Grey, and you know, as a young man, I was either Aragorn chopping up orcs on the farm, or I was Zane Grey shooting people. And I shot a steampunk Western just recently on the South Island for a young filmmaker here, a young 22-year-old, and where we were shooting, I thought we could shoot a Western TV series down here. You know, where we were in Tekapo in the South Island, there was no houses or telephone poles for 360, and it's very like kind of Montana or even Nevada down there. It kind of goes between being quite lush to being quite dry.
Excellent.
And, so maybe that'll be the thing.
Yeah.
That would be awesome.
Yeah, it sounds like you need an actor who's like in his late 50s. That could,
jeez.
No.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, I can. There's a character for a guy called Jim.
Thank you, man. Yeah, I appreciate it.
What do you look like in a Daniel Boone hat?
No, it's funny. Okay, I wasn't.
When
I was,
you had to ask.
I've got a Jed. I'll send you a picture of me when I was 5 years old, and Davy Crockett was the big. He was the big guy on TV when I was a kid growing up, and I had a Davy Crockett suit when I was like 3 years old. So
I can see it. I can picture it in my mind's eye. I can see it right now.
It's an image I hate to leave you with. I know it's really frightening, but hey, Jed, this has been a blast. I mean, I'm so tickled we had a chance to talk with you. A little bit about the projects coming up. Has been great to hear about some of the experiences you've had with just some amazing people in the film industry. And man, we can't. I mean, I hope next time when you got another project coming, I hope we can talk to you again. You know, we'd love to talk to you again.
Yeah, look, I did an audio series called The Minister of Chance in the UK, which I think they've gone into pre-production for the film as we speak, and it's an offshoot of Doctor Who, actually.
Yes, and in fact, they've got a website, I think, that I actually clued in on. I think it's like counting down the days to the release.
Yeah, so and I've got a part in that. I managed to talk myself into a part in the audio series, and they've written it into the film. So, you know, that's a very quirky little sci-fi story, which I think's got the legs, especially because of the people that he's got involved in it. It's got the legs to actually do quite well. So
nice.
You know, maybe that'll be the next thing we get to talk about.
Sounds great.
I love it. Hey, folks, we're going to have to take a quick break here. We're going to be back with more Nerdvana right after this.
Dedicated to geeks and nerds, you're listening to Project I Radio, 24/7 Nerdgasm.
Far over the misty mountains cold, 2 dungeons deep and caverns old. The pines were roaring on the height. The winds were moaning.
And welcome back to Nerdvana, ladies and gentlemen. Oh, man, I am so psyched.
Oh, man, that was completely awesome.
Awesome guy, man.
Jed Brophy.
You heard it
Thanks
live
again.
from New Zealand, Wellington, New Zealand. I've had interviews from Australia, but never New Zealand. So
we topped
this
your
is a new one
furthest
for
reaching
me.
interview.
Yes, sir.
Nice.
Yes,
nice.
sir. Absolutely. So anyway, be watching for the Hobbit, the a battle of the Five Armies.
Yep.
I almost blanked.
You
on that.
almost did it. You almost
God,
went out.
Very close, very close. But anyway, thanks, Jed. Now we're going to go party in Atlanta in a few weeks.
Yep. So be sure if you don't have
Yeah.
your passes yet to Dragon Con, get them
Better get
now.
'em.
They're going up. I mean, guys, the closer you get,
That's
the
right.
more they're going to cost. So
The
if
more
you
expensive.
want to get a chance to meet Jed, come down and see the rest of the gang there at Dragon Con.
Yep.
Patrick Stewart's going to be there. A few other people. I mean, it's going
Engage.
to be extremely star packed. I mean, just very awesome. So
Make it happen.
come down, meet the guys at Dragon Con.
Make it so.
Come karaoke with us afterward. Whatever.
Yeah, whatever. Hey, we're going to go party. I'm going to hold Jed to that, man.
Yeah. No, for sure.